Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Prasanth. I'm working with the Scratch Foundation, and I think sort of the broad topic today was to talk about insights working with children and youth. And I think we've been, I'll talk a little bit more about Scratch and what we do, and I feel like probably, Neha from Quest would be able to shed more light because they work directly with students and with teachers, and we are fortunately and unfortunately more on the platform side of things that we work. So a little bit that I want to dive into today is less on insights of working with youth, more on just like our approach to co-design. I think that that's something that underscores how Scratch has come over the years as a platform, and all of that. Also, feel free to butt in with a question or anything ongoing. Like, don't wait for the Q&A at the end. What we'll try to do is it's 12:10 approximately now. So maybe for the next, I'll try to cram a bunch of it into 10 minutes that we're trying to share, 10-15 minutes. And after that, if you have laptops around, we'll probably just try and play with Scratch a little bit. And if you don't, you can huddle around whoever near you has a laptop possibly. So we'll try to do that in the end if time sort of permits. So to those of you who are unfamiliar with Scratch, Scratch is the world's largest coding platform for kids. It's available worldwide for free. That's kind of how the platform will continue to sort of remain. You can access it at scratch.mit.edu or at scratch.org. And both of these places will take you there. If you've used it before, this is probably how the editor looks for many of us. The goal is kids are able to bring their imaginations, their ideas, their interests to life using technology. So instead of you learning how the computer works, the idea was you should be able to do things you want to do using the computer, right? And so that's sort of one of the underlying things. It's in some sense a spiritual successor to Logo, which was an original one for any of you who've learned Logo in school. And so if you look on the left, you'll see a bunch of blocks. So that's our whole approach with Scratch. It's instead of typing out long lines of code, you can just drag and drop blocks, and you can get your character on the right that we call a sprite. You can get the sprite to do lots of fun things, and you can start very easy, make us very simple. I think this project is literally if you press the green flag, the dinosaur will chirp, and you can go from there to like very, very complex things that you can do, and we'll sort of go through some of those things in detail. A little bit about our journey itself. We were born in 2007. Out of MIT's Media Lab, in particular a lab called the Lifelong Kindergarten Group, led by Dr. Natalie Rusk and Dr. Mitch Resnick. So they're kind of some of the early creators of Scratch. In 2008, we kind of crossed our first 50,000 users, and within 3 years of Scratch's launch, we crossed 1 million users around the world. 2013 is where we started to lean more into what was coming at us from the user base, and that was sort of a global community is what it started to become, because users grew beyond just the US and a few European countries to having students from around the world making projects, sharing, commenting, and getting excited about it. 2019, more recently, we moved kind of out of MIT. We sit inside the Scratch Foundation today. Still, obviously, we are we're kind of joined at the hip, but for all practical operational matters, we sit in the foundation. 2021, we launched the Scratch Education Collaborative. I'll tell you more about it over the course of this conversation. And we have some SEC members around us today. We have Muskan Dreams, we have Quest Alliance. I think there will be folks from CEL and a bunch of others here as well. 2022 was an exciting time for us because we crossed 100 million users on the platform, and 2024 this year was kind of a big landmark moment because we've crossed 1 billion projects on the Scratch platform. And so it's also exciting to see that it's free, it's open source, it's fully grown, grassroots up from the community, and kind of really engages many people, many students to unlock a lot of their creativity, right? So before I dive in, I think I'll do some definitions at the beginning, just so we're all on the same page. You'll hear me using the words creative learning a lot. That's something that we lean into a lot at Scratched. So we feel that you're engaged in creative learning when you develop ideas or things that are meaningful to you or to others that you care about. And when we talk about creative coding, so Scratch is a creative coding platform. You'll hear us refer to creative learning experiences that involve coding and or computing, not restricted to Scratch. So we feel there are so many different platforms, so many ways, languages to do it. So any of that kind of, encompasses creative coding when we're talking about it. And there's a little bit more there about what playful learning thinking entails and mindsets and all, but we'll get into it a bit. So we have a learning philosophy that we follow. So again, when you hear me talking, next few minutes, you'll hear some words. So what we do at the foundation is we design and create products and programs that support children in the ages 5 to 16 to develop their thinking, their voice and their identity. So those are three things we're trying to broadly cover, right? So when we talk about thinking skills, so you've heard today like future ready skills, you've heard 21st century skills. So we kind of bring that under the umbrella of thinking skills. For us that includes tinkering, problem solving, hypothesizing, testing, iterating, a bunch of these different skills that come inside of it. When we mean voice, because again it's a platform, it's a way that users use, that students use it to kind of they develop a sense of expression. So this could be personal expression, external self-expression, a bunch of different things, and the ability to communicate with others appropriately in digital and public spaces. I think this is again a future skill that has become a current skill very quickly, learning how to have a voice online, learning what is appropriate, what is inappropriate online, things that you would be corrected for by people around you. Now suddenly you're thrust into this huge community online and you need to kind of have a way to deal with it. And then when we say identity, we mean the pursuit and development of personal interests. So it could be affinity groups, it could be self-awareness, it could be for acceptance, it could be for increasing your self-efficacy, right? So whenever I'm talking about like the Scratch way of doing things or something being scratchy, it's often this learning philosophy that we kind of lean into. So a lot of today's conversation that we'll have is at Scratch we believe strongly in the idea of co-design, and there's a bit of a departure when I talk about co-design from things you've normally heard. You would have heard of a phrase like a word like collaboration, or you would have heard about connections, and so we believe that really if you want to build lasting products and lasting experiences that go over time, over leadership, over different kinds of transitions, you have to lean into co-design. And when I talk about co-design, I think usually when we start off trying to think about working with others towards a common cause, we'd often start with connection. So I feel events like this, networking events that you go to, these are often spaces for connection. And just imagine that you want to get somewhere, and so we've like imagine in that sort of example, connections events like this are often like asking for directions. So I could walk up to you and say, hey, how do I get to the airport? And you may help, you may not help, you may give me the wrong advice, you may give me the right advice, you may give me everything I need, don't know. Creating spaces is great. Often in programs when you lean in, you often start off with a connection aspect, right? And then kind of over the years, we've seen a lot of us move towards collaboration. And typically when you think about collaboration, it's like there are multiple, units. This could be people, organizations coming together, and you're deciding on a direction. Someone's like, we'll divvy up the responsibilities. I'll point in this direction. Rest of you are going to run over there because I have the funds to make sure all of you run in that direction. So we feel like this is often like setting a destination. In our previous analogy, it's you set a destination, and I say, what, I think you have to run in that direction, and here's some money to run with it. And then we kind of label it as collaboration often, right? So we feel that at Scratch, something that we try to like double down often is co-design. And that's like if you want to go from place to place in co-design, the analogy we use is it's like building a map together. So we're not interested in setting a destination. So whenever you see us working with our grantees or donors or any of our partner organizations, our students, our teachers, you'll often see that we don't come in saying that Scratch is the best platform in the world. Nah, there are so many, this is one of them. creative learning, this is exactly what it means. No, this is our definition. You could have a different definition, right? And when you think about, whether we are designing a program, often, so in fact, the Scratch Education Collaborative that I'll explain in a bit, the program has evolved so much over the years because of inputs from people like Quest, who are in our early cohorts, who've been early partners, right? And it's kind of come out collaboratively through feedback, through many iterations and directions, to something that is far from the vision that originally it set out to be, but a much richer, much more meaningful direction, because there are so many others involved in it, right? So that's sort of the image in my head when I think about co-design. It's everyone together trying to figure out all the pieces of the map, and then allowing those who want to find, their direction inside of it. But like the activity is something that everyone sort of, including themselves inside of. So in talking about co-design, we've broken it down into a few things. So we think there's, like, at the very start, when you're using the Scratch platform, there's co-designing with students. So you as a teacher, there must be facilitators here, you're working with your students, teaching them any kind of different things. So we lean into something called the 4 Ps approach, which is projects, peers, passion, and play. So if you are co-designing with your students, it could often mean you as a teacher or a facilitator trying to figure out, hey, what are some projects my students would enjoy? Which peers in their class would they enjoy working on this with? Are they passionate about this particular topic or something they're learning about? And is there a sense of play inside of it? So they're also really having fun and exploring and finding the limits of what is possible, right? So those are kind of, when we think about co-design with students, we feel like, oh, this is what the teachers or the facilitators that use Scratch, they're doing with their students. So you'll often find us saying that we don't have a Scratch curriculum. There is a creative coding curriculum developed by different sets of people, but we don't have a curriculum, because it depends on the organization, the context, the teacher, to be able to use the platform in the most meaningful way possible for them, right? So co-designing it in that sense. When you think about co-designing with educators, again, it's very similar in that sense, that if you look at the way we've built the platform, it does 3 things, right? One, Scratch is deliberately low floor. So we'll all get to experiment and play with it in a bit, but low floor means anybody can get started. So anyone can get onto Scratch and start their first program. You could be 5 years old, you could be 95 years old. If you can just move your mouse on this screen and move a bunch of things, you can build your first program in minutes. So it's a very low floor and easy way for you to get started. 2, we feel we have, like, a whole approach of the platform, and everything we do is very wide walls. So on one end, you could have a teacher using Scratch to teach you, algorithms, variables, etc. On the other end, you could have someone who's just using Scratch to teach, something much more powerful. How do you design a costume for Yakshagana, for example, right? That's what one of our users is doing. So you have very wide walls that can accommodate any number of wide-ranging interests, and that's sort of a big defining principle of when we think about Scratch co-design with educators, or any of you co-designing a program with educators. Are you allowing a wide, diverse variety of educators to do all the things that they love to do inside of it? And 3, we provide a very high ceiling. So I'll give you an example at Scratch of something called a map. It's a multiple animator project that's come out of the community. Thousands of students online around the world decide that we are going to make a 1-minute movie. And a 1-minute movie at 60 frames a second or 20 frames a second, is so many hundreds of frames. So teams of students decide that, okay, I'll design frame 1, you will design frame 2, you will design frame 3, you're spread out all over the world, and you actually make a very powerful animation that's just a minute long, but so many kids and teachers around the world have collaborated to these maps, right? These multiple animator projects. So that's a very complex thing you can do in Scratch. People have built Minecraft inside of Scratch, they've built all of that, right? So you can do very, very powerful projects, and I feel like that often is, again, another thing with co-design, even with your own programs. Are you allowing the really, the teachers who love doing a lot, educators who love doing a lot, are you giving them the bandwidth and space to go that far? Or do they feel shackled and feel like, what, I'm already bored with this program, I don't know what else I can do, right? So that's sort of one of the aspects of co-design. And finally, kind of leaning more into the Scratch Education Collaborative, that's a way where we co-design with organizations. We've understood over the years that as many users as you see, as large a product as it looks like, we are less than 30 people as a team. spread out around the world. And that only happens because we have so many wonderful partners. We are focused heavily in them growing, and we continue to try ways and formats to make sure that we are using Scratch's sort of thought leadership, our growth, our network, to ensure our partners grow through a program that we call the Scratch Education Collaborative. So the SEC is a really fun design. The way that it works is it's a 2-year fellowship kind of thing. I won't say fellowship, it's just a very collaborative, cohort-based organization group, for lack of a simpler way of putting it. But what we would do is, imagine you are an organization that's teaching, students in a specific context. So like Muskan Dreams, for example, is teaching in Madhya Pradesh. They are working with a set of students because that looks like that's where they want to double down. They have the interest and the capacity to do it. So our goal is, how do we get organizations like this to come to do 2 things: spend a year with us, really get a broad understanding of different things when we talk about creative learning, get exposed to the community, and 2, then design a version of Scratch, whether it's curriculum, content, a platform, whatever it is, to double down on serving those users better, and do it in a very iterative approach. So kind of we sort of lean in on heavily. Our grantees are it's very trust based, right? So we kind of, once the grant is given, we kind of trust you to go with it and do the best that you need to do for your learners, right? So to break it down, so we have the collaborative has right now I think 216 organizations or 200 in that range around the world that are part of this. We have 4 cohorts running. Currently cohort 3 and 4 are sort of in the mix, and cohort 1 and 2 have gone in, and they form this fabulous group. They serve over 9 million students, all these organizations put together. So that becomes the core group that we really work with and double down on in different ways, right? So the SEC for us is a model of co-design when we think about it, because one, we have a workshops thing, very standard 2-hour workshops that we get in. Each year the workshops change and evolve based on what the cohort sort of demands of it, and what the previous cohorts have given us feedback on. 2, we do lots of small group discussions. 3, we do lots of chats with different ones. So we're blessed to be in a larger ecosystem because of this approach. And then I think what's beautiful is we have a powerful Slack community where organizations kind of meet each other and they engage with each other in really powerful ways. A lot of fun collaborations come out of it. Apart from that, we do check-ins. We're a small team of 3 of us that check in with all of our 200 organizations over the course of the year. And then we come up with something called an equitable creative coding resource, and that's sort of the work where an organization says, like for Quest, it's gender is one of those topics they wanted to work on, gender and STEM, and they've doubled down on creating like an like a curriculum resource that works for their learners, solving problems that they want. It could or could not be using Scratch in its process, but that's sort of broadly what it does, right? So then we have our Scratch ecosystems. These are people who've been through the SEC and they've kind of helped anchor SEC in Scratch in different parts of the world. We have Quest, of course, in India, who's our ecosystem partner, but really interesting approaches. I would highly recommend you read about it if you're interested in systems change in general. In Brazil, it's called the Brazilian Creative Learning Network. In Kenya, it's the STEM Impact Center, STEAM for Vietnam, STEM NOLA, Barefoot. Every single one of these works with their organizations using Scratch in a very unique way, and they all sort of make us richer in that process, right? And so the big question is, so what? What might happen if you consistently co-design? We've done it over 20 years now, consistently co-designing all of this. One thing that happens is, today we sit inside an ecosystem of CS education that has all sprung out of Scratch. So whether you look at code.org, Girls Who Code, CS First, Tinker, any of these, the original sort of building blocks of the idea of block-based programming were born out of Scratch, collaborating year on year, and so you sit inside this sort of ecosystem, right? And 2, beyond CS education, there's a larger engineering and tangible computing ecosystem that, again, it's sort of it's born in many ways out of Scratch alumni in the past. So whether it's Microbit, Lego, Raspberry Pi, Makey, so you sit inside of this beautiful ecosystem, and today, like 20 years from where the creator started it, you can see that Scratch has come sort of a distance in influencing what happens when you think about computer science education or tangible computing or engineering education, right? So we strongly believe that co-design is the future. So even in your own programs, I think the piece I want to leave you with is sort of thinking about, are you creating platforms and programs that allow your users to co-design? Are you co-designing it with them, and are you sticking at it consistently over a significant period of time? This is when you start to see the ecosystem overall developing, right? So want to end with Mitch. He's one of the founders of Scratch, and he's a Lego professor of learning. He says creative thinking will always be what makes life worth living, bringing not only economic rewards but also joy, fulfillment, purpose and meaning, and children deserve nothing less. So thank you for that. Maybe I'll field one or two questions and then we can play with Scratch. I think that would be the best, most fun way to end this day. So if you don't have a question, I'd love if you could open up your laptops, connect to the internet and go to scratch.org or scratch.mit.edu. Yes? If you have a browser, you can use it. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Yeah, scratch.mit.edu. Yes. Yeah, on YouTube you'll find all of the tutorials that explain it, but I'll also show you how to get to it. Yeah. Yes.
So, in my past experience now, I'm working with this Scratch almost for 4 years. It's really fun to sort of explore the creative part of the existence. So, just when you were sort of taking the decision and just delivering Scratch, I just pick my phone and then one of my teacher is actually doing something with the Scratch and it's
nice.
So it's really good to see that culminating into something.
Nice.
Whatever we're trying to say here is actually getting demonstrated on the ground.
Yes.
So, what we have found is that the learning, the fun part, and that is completely sort of very subjective to students, very subjective to organizations, the teachers, and all that.
Yeah.
A whole lot of ecosystem comes together in order to have it. But when we are working toward these goals, and specifically in countries like India, you have very specific sort of domains from the grantees or funded side or the government sector side, right?
Yeah.
And they have their own parameters in order to judge your intervention.
Yes.
That's a part of the play that
yeah.
I just wanted to understand that what are the sorts of are there any standardized impact assessments in case of creative learnings which can be explored in order to come them on one good platform that we are talking about?
Right.
So as we build a platform to learn, think, are there any impact assessment format where we can actually see and convince people, hey, that actually works? So one is the project by which you build it, and very few people have understanding of, and the cohort is increasing, but the pace is slow.
Right.
However, these people, they have a set of those norms. What are the common things which can be done in order to sort of do it on a proper platform for them?
Right. It's a great question. I think that what sort of just for those, he's asking a little bit about like how do you assess the impact of it, what methods exist. So to start with, Scratch was never intended to be an in-school tool. It was born in the Clubhouse network. It was supposed to be out of school. It was kind of antithesis to the structures that school puts on you and the shackles that put on it. But as sort of times have moved on, it's become, it's gone into curriculum, right? And so that's sort of been a place of tension for us also internally to figure out now that we were never built to be in curriculum, but now kind of there are screenshots. You open any textbook for computer science today, you will see Scratch. It will say click this, click this, click this, click this, right? So the problem of that whole approach of this whole tension is that we are not equipped to figure out what is the best way to assess that impact. There are a lot of researchers working on it. I think Dr. Marina Burrs at Boston College, using Scratch Junior, has done a lot of studies on creative learning, and she's kind of leaning more into both the teacher development side as well as impact assessment side. But I would recommend that you look more onto, just go to Google Scholar and find other studies. But in general at Scratch, we're kind of clear that it exists in curriculum, but not because we made it happen. It's just kind of like gone there over the years, but it's broadly like I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a bad word for us internally, but we don't think often of it because we're judged by different metrics as a programming language. We are unfortunately or fortunately not judged by the same metrics that you would be, right? Because our donors would judge us on, like, you know, how the platform is growing, what are things students are doing on the platform. You unfortunately or fortunately are judged based on how much are the students are able to translate this into careers or future readiness and things like that, right? Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'll just take his and then I'll come to you.
So, I just want to understand from the Indian perspective, your experience from the Indian perspective, that because very basic, it's in English. And the people we are working with,
Yes.
they are still struggling with the language, regional
Right.
language. English is something
Yeah.
completely alien.
Yeah.
So, how do you
So we actually exist in many languages. So you can go and check out, I think in India we are supported in Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, Telugu, Kannada. So we and again, all of that we rely on our volunteer base that signs up to localize and translate the Scratch editor for us. So if any of you want to contextualize it for your region, please write to me. And that's something that we do. We have like large teams of volunteers around the world that engage with that volunteering aspect. Yeah, so that's sort of how we grow. We actually do contextualize, and it's available in many, many local languages around the world. So I think we're in 100 and something languages overall as a platform. So yeah.
How does it, like, for example, let's say an organization is there and they want to use this service.
Right.
Do they, so you have told that you do the training, but do you have a volunteer space where
Right.
they go and then support the...
So usually what we do is we find the nearest Scratch Education collaborative organization where you are located, and we kind of get you folks in touch. So that's generally been the approach. But otherwise it's a very easy platform to get started on. Like, you don't need a lot. And because of the years it has existed, there's a huge base of like tutorials and creators on the internet that teach really exciting ways of playing with Scratch in very different contexts as well, right? So yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but yes.
Yeah, I'm referring to the same code here. So it is talking beyond economic rewards.
Yes.
And these 4 words that you have to implement purpose and meaning. So you are talking the approach from lower to ceiling.
Sorry? Yeah.
From lower to ceiling.
Yes.
You are integrating all 3 layers.
Yes.
And sir is asking about impact.
Yes.
Can we measure these on these 4 points?
So it's a good question. I think Mitch comes from a place of, you know, Scratch is one of the programs that he's built. They work on a variety of different creative learning topics. So we feel like the focus is less on these things, but on creative thinking, and that's sort of what we want to measure and we want to understand. And we kind of are relying on many different researchers around the world that are using both Scratch and other platforms to figure out if creative thinking is happening with Scratch, right? So yeah, so I don't know whether we can directly measure economic rewards, joy, fulfillment, purpose, but we're saying that if kids are engaging, spending a lot of time coming up with a lot of creative things, possibly it could lead to some of those things. Yeah.
Because your base is connection, then collaboration, then company, then co-design.
Yeah.
What is next? It should be community.
Right.
And what next is?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. We appreciate your feedback. Yes. Awesome. So we didn't have time to play with the platform, but please go to scratch.mit.edu and try and make the cat mew. I heard someone making the cat mew in this audience, so it's a lot of fun to do it. So thank you for your time.